In 1995, writer Kurt Busiek came to Image Comics with a premise for a series about a city of superheroes.
Busiek's career had taken off in the early 90s thanks to work like Marvels, a chronicle of the Marvel Universe featuring fully painted artwork by Alex Ross, and Thunderbolts, a unique group of superheroes who popped up in the wake of the Avengers' apparent disappearance.
Busiek's new series, which would feature interior artwork by Brent Anderson and cover art by the aforementioned Alex Ross, would eschew the traditional hero versus villain battle format and favor more of a slice-of-life approach. In other words, looking at the personal lives of the heroes and seeing how they affect the world and the people around them. Now, because it was at Image and not Marvel or DC, that means we get a lot of superhero analogs. For example, the Samaritan is Superman, the Confessor is Batman, Winged Victory is Wonder Woman, the First Family is the Fantastic Four, and so forth.
The series, titled Astro City, has gone on to garner a legion of fans and win a litany of awards. It's moved on from Image, first to Wildstorm Publications, and then to DC Vertigo, although unlike other Vertigo titles, it is not a mature reader's book.
Today we look at the humble beginnings of this landmark series. This is Astro City Volume 1, Life in the Big City.
Samaritan dreams of flying through the skies, unencumbered by duty. The dream is short-lived. They all are. This time, a tsunami is headed for Manila. Then it's a terrorist attack in Turkey. And when he's done with that, he actually has to go to his real job. Samaritan changes into a civilian persona of Asa Martin, line editor and proofreader for the Astro City Current newspaper. Of course, he actually doesn't do his job. He leaves that to his supercomputer, the Zixometer. Why? Because he needs to deal with a runaway bus in Astro City, then an attack in Denver by the supervillain Dr. Saturday, and then finally he has to battle some giant parameciums at a local science lab. He arrives back at the Current just in time for lunch, by which I mean it's time to visit the Honor Guard, Astro City's super team. The heroes compare notes on the recent activities and give the alien detection system an overhaul. Then the guard needs to break up a bank robbery by the Menagerie gang. After that, it's back to work, where he's barely able to avoid missing a deadline. His boss hands him a new story to peruse. It's about the 25 most beautiful women in Astro City. Samaritan longs for a relationship. Doesn't have to be a celebrity, it could just be anyone. But duty calls again, this time in the form of a massive jailbreak. After helping to raise a long-sunken ship and saving a feline, it's time to call it a night. The Samaritan plops into bed and begins to dream. This time for a whopping 56 seconds, a new personal best. Meanwhile, at the Astro City Rocket, the city's most trusted newspaper, Editor-in-Chief Elliot Mills welcomes a new reporter. The rookie peruses the accolades on the wall of Mills's office and notices that one of the articles doesn't seem to really belong. Mills then begins to give the story behind the story. It was 1959, a transitional period from the World War II era heroes to the one that began appearing in the 60s. Mills was a rookie reporter and dating an up-and-coming actress. One day, he saw one of the city's newest heroes, Silver Agent, breaking up a bank robbery. Mills eagerly raced to a payphone to call in the report, only to be scooped by a senior reporter who had been following the event longer. At the local press club, several veteran reporters try to pick up the downtrodden Mills as they point out that his time will come. Little did those guys realize how prophetic they would be. After dropping off his girlfriend at her apartment, Mills noticed several cloaked individuals breaking into a closed subway tunnel. Mills followed them and discovered that it was Karnas of the cult of Sharrak the Devourer. The cult was trying to resurrect their god by imbuing a shark carcass with magic. The group was interrupted by the Silver Agent and the other members of the original Honor Guard. Sharrak transformed several of his followers into shark people and the fight was on. Just when it appeared the burgeoning super team would be overwhelmed, the old soldier, a hero thought killed in World War II, appeared. This turned the tide of the battle and the Guard quickly defeated the shark people and Mills had his story. He raced to the press club and typed it up. He then turned it into his editor and promptly got rejected. The Honor Guard didn't do interviews, which means the only witness was Mills, and the report could not be verified. So, in reality, the article contains the only thing that can be proven, that a shark carcass was found in a subway tunnel. Over time, Mills realized that his editor was right. People read the newspaper for the truth. If you can't back up a report, then they lose the faith in you. You can't have
people reading fake news.
There's a section of Astro City known as the sweatshop, due to the high amount of textile mills. It's there that a low-level hood makes a getaway from an attempted burglary gone wrong. He hides out on a rooftop from the person who's pursuing him. It's the hero known as Jack in the Box. Jack doesn't seem to notice the hood as he begins to unmask, revealing an African-American man under the mask. The hood lays low, making sure not to get noticed as Jack leaves. The hood, whose name is Andrew Einstein, begins fantasizing about the underworld prestige of knowing a hero's identity. There's just one problem. He has a face, but no name. Einstein goes to a nearby dive bar to seek some advice from some cronies, except he then imagines that they would immediately sell him out and reap all the benefits for themselves. So he clams up. The drinking is interrupted by Jack-in-the-Box crashing through the establishment's window. Fearing he's been found out, Einstein slips out through the men's room window. Knowing he needs to at least put a name to the face, Einstein spends the next morning stomping around the sweatshop, hoping to bump into Jack-in-the-Box. It actually works, as he spots Jack stepping out of his apartment with a girl who is an anchor for one of the morning news shows. Einstein plays fanboy and asks the woman for an autograph. Her name is Tamara Dixon. Name in hand, Einstein goes to the library and looks for info on Dixon on a microfiche reader. He finds a picture of her and her husband, Zachary Johnson. Einstein now has a name. However, this doesn't bring him as much joy as he hopes. He's certain that Jack knows who he is. He had foolishly tried using the cover name of Jack Boxinger. Einstein really doesn't have anywhere else to turn. He can't go to the press. Dixon could easily squash a story about her husband. He can't go to the Deacon, Astro City's crime lord, because that could just get him tortured and killed as soon as he gave up the information. There's just one thing he can do. He gathers up his meager possessions and buys a bus ticket out of town. On the outskirts of Astro City lies the small town of Shadow Hill. The people there are a superstitious lot, as the city is haunted by Lovecraftian horrors at night. The people, though, are protected by a local guardian known as the Hanged Man. One of these citizens is Marta, who works as an accounting clerk in Astro City. She loves the city and her job. She works for Darcy Conroy, the fiancé of Nick First of the First family. But her parents would wish she'd just settle down with a local boy, like the guy who runs the local butcher shop. One day, as she's about to get on the bus into the city, Marta notices the hangman staring at her. That day, Blinderbach Plaza, where Marta's office is located, is attacked by a villain group called the Unholy Alliance. Darcy Conroy activates the talisman to contact the First family and begins ushering people towards the emergency exits. However, an explosion separates Marta from her coworkers, and just as she makes it out, a brick wall topples on top of her. When she comes to, a member of the Alliance has her hands in his clutches. She then gets rescued by none other than Nick First. The First family take down the rest of the Unholy Alliance, and Darcy checks on Marta, who is being treated by paramedics. Marta wonders if the hangman was actually trying to send her a message with his glance earlier. The next day, Marta elects not to go into the city, and instead enters the local butcher shop, which is looking for someone to handle the books. Sometime later, an old man trudges through the snow when he's inadvertently wandering into the path of a battle between a group of villains and a hero named Crackerjack. The old man finds a bench in a nearby park and pulls out a rather interesting-looking laptop. He begins inputting data on Crackerjack and several other heroes when he's interrupted by a kid who thinks the computer is some type of video game console. The old man returns to the boarding house. He runs from a group of old ladies and unfortunately shares with a Broducci wannabe actor named Eugene Wallace. Eugene heads to his room after another failed audition, while the old ladies question his sexuality. Annoyed, the old man named Birdwell goes to his room and sets about his tasks. You see, Birdwell is no ordinary man. In fact, he's really an advanced scout for an invading alien race. Birdwell's mission is to collect data on Earth's heroes and message his home planet when the time is right for invasion. Even though he's sick of Earth, Birdwell is still hesitant to give the all-clear and continues his reconnaissance. That night, the boarding house catches on fire, trapping Birdwell in his room. He begins to collect evidence of his inhumanity when Crackerjack comes crashing through the window. Birdwell slips a tracer on the hero as the two just barely make it out of the house before it collapses. It's then that something strange happens. Crackerjack screams out about how he lost his record collection. Onlookers, including Birdwell, then realize that Eugene Wallace is Crackerjack. This leaves Birdwell wanting to know more. Birdwell then spends the next day trailing Crackerjack on his computer. He wants to see if Eugene is truly noble, and maybe then Earth would actually be worth saving. Things start out well, with Crackerjack taking down a villain robbing a bank. However, further following reveals that Crackerjack is just a glad-handing show-off, more interested in looking good and hitting on heroines, rather than actually fighting crime. Birdwell returns to the remnants of the boarding house to the news that the police found evidence suggesting that the identity of Eugene Wallace was also a ruse. Also, the old ladies who were once questioning Crackerjack's sexuality are now fawning over him. This proves to be too much for Birdwell, who hooks up his computer to a transmitter and sends a message. Bring the fleet! Elsewhere, a nervous Samaritan waits outside an apartment holding a bouquet of flowers. He's somewhat surprised when a normal-looking woman answers the door. The awkwardness is stemming from whether or not these two are supposed to be in their civilian or hero identities for their date.
It's not exactly mentioned in this story, but the woman's name is Lauren Freed, and she is the alter ego of Winged Victory, having been granted superpowers by Nike, the Greek winged goddess of victory.
Lauren changes into Winged Victory, and she leaves with Samaritan. It turns out this was set up by the Honor Guard, realizing that both heroes were in desperate need of a night off, and that they could take care of the rest of the world.
I should point out that while it appears Winged Victory has a mutual respect for the Honor Guard, she is not actually a member of the group.
Samaritan and Winged Victory head to a fancy restaurant. However, the two attract way too much attention to enjoy anything, so they switch their civilian identities and take in a greasy spoon while checking on the Honor Guard via their mutual supercomputers. Asa Martin then goes into his backstory. He's from the 35th century when Earth had been ravaged by radiation and environmental collapse. He was chosen to be sent back in time, along with a sixometer, to prevent the tragedy that started Earth's downfall. Somehow, traveling through the time stream caused him to be imbued with superpowers. When he arrived in late 1985, he spent the next few weeks mastering his abilities. Upon completion, he set out to prevent the future by rescuing the astronauts involved in the Challenger disaster. He's certain that this was the event that he was meant to prevent, after he returned briefly to the 35th century a few years later and revealed it to be an idyllic paradise. There's just one catch. His family seems to have never existed. His boyhood home has been replaced by a taco stand. Lauren explains that she believes she was appointed the champion of women's rights. She doesn't just open shelters for disenfranchised women. She's opened schools, places for women to be taught to be confident, self-reliant, and to defend themselves. This is why certain members of the press have branded her a cult leader. She rarely ever is in her civilian form, opting instead to stay at one of her schools. The apartment she was at earlier actually belonged to an employee, and she's never seen her family in 2 years. When Asa points out that she's effectively using Winged Victory as a shelter for herself, Lauren transforms and flies off. Asa changes into Samaritan and takes off in pursuit. The two stop at the top of the Astro Bank Tower, the tallest point in the city, and he tries to apologize, but she admits that he didn't make some good points. It's then the clock strikes midnight and the two notice something. There are no screams or cries of panic, no disasters, no attacks from a supervillain. The world is actually at peace. The gravity of the situation is enough for the two to begin kissing. However, the peace is short-lived, and the two must return to fight against evil in all its forms. Though they do leave the possibility for another chance meeting.
And so concludes Astro City Volume 1, Life in the Big City. How was it? Well, you're going to have to count me among the many who are going to laud this book and recommend it to people. I really like the stories in this. They're really fun. They're not dull in any way, shape, or form. I actually like the characterization in this. I love how the first story in the book about how overworked Samaritan is and how he doesn't have any sort of personal life actually parallels the last story of the book about how Samaritan finally gets a day off. I mean, and of course, Winged Victory as well. And they go out on a date so they can actually have some personal time. Like I said, the characters are very relatable in this. Even, technical villains like Einstein and Birdwell, who, while not necessarily on the good side of the coin, still have a degree of relatability to them. And the artwork by Brent Anderson is really spectacular and enjoyable. I know sometimes people, when they look at a cover of a book and the interior does not match the cover, it kind of is a turnoff, but I don't think that's going to apply in this case. It's still really good. If I do have one little drawback to this, it's that this book does not introduce characters very well. I already mentioned that Winged Victory's alter ego of Lauren Freed is not mentioned in the story that she plays a prominent role in. Also, Marta's family never gets a last name. And also in the Marta story, there's this villain named, he's referred to as Slamburger, and I don't know if that's actually the villain's name, or if that's just meant to be a derogatory nickname Nick First is using. But overall, that's really, really minor nitpick. Astro City Volume 1, Life in the Big City, gets an A. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my work at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions, where you can request a trade to be placed in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box.